Today I'll be going over Chapter 18 of Alanna Nash's book, The Colonel. Chapter 18 is titled Geek Fever. In March 1972, Parker told the Las Vegas Hilton that filming Elvis on tour would keep Elvis unavailable for the rest of the year. Since the documentary took less than 2 months, the claim was mainly a tactic to renegotiate Elvis's Vegas contract. For some leverage, Parker hinted that Elvis might move to the new MGM Grand, pressuring the Hilton into better terms. In April 1972, it agreed to pay Elvis $130,000 a week for 2 engagements, then $150,000 a week for 3 more, while Parker received a separate $50,000 annual consulting fee for 3 years. $50,000 is worth just under $400,000 today. For Elvis's June 1972 tour, Parker hired Tampa's Clanton Ross Advertising Agency, partly run by Bob Ross, Marie's 47-year-old son, who had early multiple sclerosis. Recently divorced, Ross was dating Sandra Polk, a Tampa woman 17 years younger, who frequently attended Elvis's Las Vegas shows with her cousin. Despite their uneasy relationship, Parker helped Ross obtain excellent medical care and continued sending business to his agency. Ross's company created Elvis's album covers, posters, and billboards, and later received advertising work for other major stars that Parker would send his way. For the June 1972 tour, Elvis was booked for 3 shows at Madison Square Garden beginning June 9th. Parker had long avoided Manhattan in the 50s because he feared Elvis might not fill a major arena there. But things were different now. Demand was so strong that Parker added a 4th show, making Elvis the first performer to sell out 4 consecutive concerts at Madison Square Garden. The engagement grossed $730,000. Elvis returned to New York wary of the press that had once mocked him, but by 1972 he had become a respected mainstream star, as Parker intended. At the Madison Square Garden press conference, Elvis appeared relaxed and witty, winning over reporters while Parker watched confidently. Less than a week before the concerts, RCA decided to record them for a live album and rushed to arrange contracts and equipment. The plan was kept secret because Elvis chose songs spontaneously and might have been unsettled by knowing he was being recorded. The concerts went smoothly, but opening comedian Jackie Kahane was booed off stage the first night. Elvis later visited his dressing room to comfort him. Kahane remembers, he said, "Mr. Kahane, there are animals out there. Don't let them bother you. You go out there tomorrow and you kick ass." Elvis's entrance to Also Sprach Zarathustra triggered such intense applause and flash photography that Madison Square Garden briefly seemed illuminated. The New York Times praised him as a legendary, unmatched performer. A prince from another planet, Nash writes, quote, "Yet as Presley's career moved to a new tier of fame and accomplishment, his personal life crumbled around him. On July 26, 1972, Elvis and Priscilla legally separated. Presley's lawyer, Ed Hookstratton, drew up the papers, secured a lawyer for Priscilla, and worked out the amicable terms of the divorce settlement," end quote. So I didn't know that Elvis's lawyer actually helped Priscilla retain her own lawyer. Anyway, the settlement would give Priscilla $100,000, $1,000 monthly support, and $500 a month in child support. Elvis had already begun dating Linda Thompson, a Memphis beauty queen who cared for him and initially tolerated his prescription drug use. During Elvis's August 1972 Las Vegas engagement, another death threat deepened his unease. When radio and television personality Wolfman Jack asked what it was like to be Elvis Presley, Elvis replied, "I'll tell you what, Jack, it's very, very uncomfortable." The impending divorce worsened Elvis's decline, leading to heavier use of sedatives and what Nash describes as the final stage of his drug dependence. Though sometimes lucid, he was occasionally so impaired on stage that even a child asked Jackie Kahane, "Was Elvis drunk?" According to Lamar Fike, Elvis routinely combined Valium, Placidil, Valmid, Budobarbital, and codeine, later adding Percodan and liquid Demerol, an increasingly dangerous mixture of sedatives and painkillers. On September 4th, 1972, Parker and RCA announced Aloha from Hawaii for January 1973, claiming a potential audience of 1.4 billion, though not all live, as Europe and the United States would see delayed broadcasts. RCA Record Tours would produce the event, and RCA planned a worldwide simultaneous release of the concert's double LP. At the press conference, Elvis repeatedly said the satellite broadcast was difficult to comprehend. Observers were more concerned by his heavy, sweating, slurred speech, and dazed appearance. Before Aloha from Hawaii, Elvis reduced his weight to 175 pounds and stopped his usual drug regimen for 2 weeks. However, just before the concert, he requested a vitamin B12 injection mixed with amphetamines. Marty Lacker remembers, "The next morning, we were supposed to go to the USS Arizona Memorial. We banged on his door and nobody answered. Finally, Linda came and she just made a face and shook her head. Elvis was sitting on the balcony on the top floor of the hotel, stoned out of his gourd. He was sweating profusely with a towel around his neck, and he could hardly talk. He'd gone right back into it." Aloha from Hawaii marked Elvis's final undeniable triumph as a global superstar. Its album spent 35 weeks on the Billboard chart and reached #1, his first chart-topping LP in 9 years, but it would also be his last. Parker seemed to sense this. After the broadcast, he wrote Elvis an emotional congratulatory letter at 3 a.m. saying they did not need to hug because they could understand each other's feelings simply by seeing one another near the stage. The letter continued, "I always know that when I do my part, you always do yours in your own way and in your feeling and how to do it best. That is why you and I are never at each other when we are doing our work in our own best way possible. You, above all, make all of it work by being the leader and the talent. Without your dedication to your following, it couldn't have been done." Parker's unusual emotion came during a period of serious personal strain. Now wearing size 3XL clothing, he reportedly suffered his 4th heart attack, while Marie's worsening headaches, impaired speech, and confusion suggested her health was rapidly declining. Bitsy Mott remembers, "She started getting senile, like she was 90 years old instead of 65. Parker called Marie twice daily, but her mental decline had become so severe that she sometimes failed to recognize him and would often hang up on him. Parker continued visiting Marie in Palm Springs every weekend and believed her headaches were connected to the metal implant from her hip surgery. Her doctor suspected degenerative brain disease or age-related dementia, although her symptoms did not always fit that diagnosis. Bitsy said, "It just got worse and worse, till finally she was immobile all over." Parker became nostalgic, remembering the days he would buy Marie her favorite shoes in every color to compensate for their earlier poverty. As her illness worsened, however, Sandra Polk Ross said he became more distant. She remembers, "Colonel started to distance himself from her, keep her home. He would still take her to Vegas, but he would always have someone go with them and be with her." Within 3 years, Marie's confusion became so severe that she mistook her son for her first husband and behaved inappropriately while visiting Bob and Sandra in Florida, trying to open their bedroom door so she could crawl in bed with them. Parker's nursing expenses eventually reached $6,000 a month. Under growing strain from Marie's illness, Elvis's problems, and his own health, Parker buried himself in business. After Freddie Beanstalk was fired by the Aberbox, Parker met with the brothers in August 1972 to dissolve Elvis and Gladys music firms and plan new publishing companies, Aaron Music and Mr. Songman Music, with Beanstalk. Beanstalk said Parker had once felt close to the Aberbock brothers, but carried growing resentments, especially after they ended social contact following Beanstalk's departure. By forming a new partnership with Beanstalk, Parker hoped to prove that they understood and controlled Elvis's music catalog better than the Aberbocks did. By this time, Parker had a new secretary. Loanne Miller had previously worked for Nick Naff and embraced an extremely devoted, submissive view of the role, believing a secretary should serve her boss in virtually any way required. Naff respected Loanne's abilities but disliked her excessive submissiveness. When Alex Shuvi asked to transfer her to Parker, Naff gladly agreed, believing her devotion made her ideally suited for Parker. She even handled personal duties such as planning Bob and Sandra Ross's wedding. She combined New Age and holistic interests with both childlike enthusiasm and strong determination. She idolized Parker and defended everything he did. She said, "Most people have no idea how much of a genius he was because they weren't with him enough to understand." Soon after Loanne began working for Parker, he summoned her to an important MGM meeting and warned her to take careful notes. She arrived to find the conference table occupied entirely by 12 large teddy bears with pads and pencils in front of each one. Parker placed Loanne on RCA's payroll as George Parkhill's executive secretary, which gave her a reason to travel with him. Some hotel employees assumed she was Parker's girlfriend, and Bitsy Mott claimed he had seen them together in quote, compromising circumstances on more than one occasion. Parker took care of both Marie and Loanne, buying them dresses obtained through casino clothing representatives, size 7 for the shrinking Marie and size 12 for the lanky Loanne. Because Loanne was tall, cheerful, and completely loyal to Parker, Elvis's entourage mockingly nicknamed her Howdy Doody. Elvis returned to the Hilton in late January 1973 for his 8th engagement, appearing tired and uninspired, then began canceling shows citing the flu. On February 18th, 4 South American men rushed the stage, but Elvis and his entourage quickly subdued them, with Elvis knocking one into the crowd. Elvis told the audience, "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I didn't break his goddamn neck is what I'm sorry about." The men were merely overexcited fans, but Elvis became convinced that Mike Stone had sent them to kill him. While heavily under the influence, he ordered Red West to arrange Stone's murder, though he backed away from the idea about a week later. Nash writes, quote, "Priscilla was also on Elvis's mind for another reason. She'd agreed to far too little money in the divorce settlement, she told him, and planned to see a new lawyer about renegotiating the terms. If it came to that, Parker had a good idea where Elvis could get the money." End quote. Since the fall of 1972, RCA executive Mel Ilberman had been negotiating with Parker, whose restrictions prevented Elvis's recordings from appearing in RCA's record club or lower-priced reissues. Ilberman proposed buying Elvis's existing master recordings and back catalog for $3 million. So that would be about $24 million in today's money. Parker initially rejected the sale because RCA would no longer owe royalties on pre-1973 recordings, and Elvis would lose control over their use. Vernon favored the immediate cash, so Parker agreed to seek a higher offer despite believing the catalog could become more valuable. Ilberman remembers, "I figured it would take a big check, but a lot of the people in the company weren't very happy with that because Elvis's sales had deteriorated dramatically." Parker negotiated RCA's offer up to $5.4 million. In return, Elvis sold the company all rights to every recording he had made through March 1st, 1973. After securing the RCA deal, Parker demanded a new management contract, giving him 50% of all recording income from the first dollar. Touring revenue remained divided 2/3 to Elvis and 1/3 to Parker. But Parker also secured a new 7-year RCA contract requiring Elvis to record 2 albums and 4 singles annually for at least $500,000 per year. Although Elvis was guaranteed the label's highest top royalty rate, critics later argued the deal undervalued him after the success of Aloha from Hawaii, even as his Las Vegas image had weakened his standing as a rock artist. The RCA contract paid him only about half the royalty rate received by major contemporaries such as the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and Elton John. The $500,000 annual guarantee was split equally between Elvis and Parker, while Parker also received additional payments for promoting records and tours and developing merchandising ideas. Mel Ilberman said Parker insisted on a very short contract and routinely negotiated separate side deals as part of his business strategy. Ilberman says, "He always had side deals with everybody. That was the nature of the animal. It was almost a game." Nash writes, quote, "In the end, RCA paid the pair $10.5 million. Of that, $6 million would go to the Colonel and $4.5 million to Elvis. After taxes, Elvis would retain roughly $2 million for his best work, arguably the most valuable recordings in popular music, and now his wife was asking for a large chunk of it." When the divorce was finalized in October 1973, Priscilla would receive $725,000 in cash, $4,200 a month in spousal support for 1 year. After that, it would increase to $6,000 for 10 years, $4,000 per month in child support, 5% of Elvis's new publishing companies, and half the proceeds from their California home. During Elvis's May 1973 Sahara Tahoe engagement, he appeared lethargic and about 30 pounds overweight. He canceled several shows and underwent chest x-rays. Marty Lacker believed he was emotionally exhausted. He said, "He wasn't sick. He was just tired of all that shit. We flew home and he was fine." Parker had been paid a $100,000 fee for his assistance with the engagement, but he ended up returning it. After Elvis returned to Memphis, Parker complained to Vernon about friends and relatives openly discussing Elvis's prescription drug abuse. His condition had become so obvious that even young Lisa Marie frequently witnessed him swallowing large quantities of pills. Lisa remembers, "One night when I was about 5 or 6, we were watching TV. I looked up at him and said, 'Daddy, Daddy, I don't want you to die.' And he just looked down at me and said, 'Okay, I won't. Don't worry about it.' I said that to him several times when we were alone together. I guess I was picking something up." Poor Lisa. Dr. Nick described Elvis as a, quote, hard addict, already suffering serious bladder and bowel problems that would later cause incontinence and impotence. Suspecting Dr. Nick and possibly others of supplying the drugs, Parker and Vernon hired investigator John O'Grady through through attorney Ed Hookstratton to investigate. O'Grady identified 3 doctors and a dentist who were supplying Elvis with drugs. Although they were threatened and some deliveries were intercepted, the effort failed because Elvis did not want to stop and others continued enabling him. Some of Elvis's drug suppliers were members of his own entourage, while another was a friend whose husband was a doctor. Jackie Kahaney recalled that drugs were extremely widespread in the group. In a January 31st, 1974 informant report about mafia and drugs in entertainment, an agent noted, quote, "Organized crime reaps profits from the entertainers by receiving kickbacks for obtaining their bookings in popular night spots and, in some cases, furnishing the performers with narcotics. Person contacted stated this is true currently in the case of Elvis Presley. Person contacted stated that Presley is currently psychologically addicted to and a heavy user of cocaine. Because of this, he has turned down an engagement in England, which would have netted him several $1 million, end quote. Larry Geller, who was back within the circle since 1972, said Elvis briefly used liquid cocaine obtained from California dentist Dr. Max Shapiro, applying it inside his nose with Q-tips. Elvis later began using Dilaudid, a powerful opioid, having entourage members inject it into his hip, because he felt only junkies injected themselves. It reportedly became his preferred narcotic. As Elvis's drug use worsened, his relationship with Parker deteriorated further in summer 1973. They argued over Elvis's failed Stax sessions in Memphis and his hiring of the gospel group Voice for $100,000 a year, with Parker suspecting that one member was helping supply Elvis with drugs. By Elvis's August 1973 Las Vegas engagement, his decline was obvious. The Hollywood Reporter called his opening show unsteady, poorly prepared, and tragic, while Parker, recovering from a broken ankle, used a cane as he tried to contain the damage. During the same engagement, Elvis accidentally broke a female guest's ankle while demonstrating a karate move. The incident introduced him to Elias Ganem, the Hilton's 34-year-old house doctor and a Lebanese immigrant who had begun working as a Las Vegas emergency room physician in 1971. At the time, Ganem was opening the first of several 24-hour medical centers near the Las Vegas Hilton. Outside work, he spent time at the racetrack and socialized with celebrities. Ganem soon became Elvis's preferred Las Vegas doctor, receiving a Stutz Bearcat and a Mercedes from him. Kathy Westmoreland claimed Elvis worsened under his care because Ganem prescribed drugs too freely and seemed to imitate Elvis, even wearing jumpsuits and darkening his hair. Although Elvis disliked Ganem's imitation of him, he increasingly relied on the doctor. Ganem recognized that Elvis's health was rapidly deteriorating, including unhealthy weight gain, a fatty liver, severe constipation, and increasingly dangerous behavior. On October 11, 1973, 2 days after his divorce became final, Elvis, now addicted to Demerol, was hospitalized after experiencing breathing problems. Although Parker publicly blamed pneumonia, the stave functioned as detoxification following one of 3 reported overdoses that year, and at Dr. Nick's suggestion, Elvis's January 1974 Las Vegas engagement was shortened from 4 weeks to 2. Dr. Nick also recommended Elvis take up racquetball as a way to exercise. During rehearsals at RCA Studios in Los Angeles earlier in the month, Elvis auditioned Louisiana bassist Duke Bardwell, a lifelong fan who was extremely nervous there. Bardwell heard that Elvis had gained weight and had been placed on a severe 500-calorie-a-day diet with unusual injections of something that sounded like rabbit urine. When he saw Elvis, he was struck by his dramatic appearance, including his cape, dark glasses, cigar, and handgun. When Bardwell asked why a trained martial artist carried a gun, Elvis said it handled threats beyond 6 feet. In Las Vegas, Elvis's drug use contributed to increasingly dangerous behavior, including firing guns recklessly and nearly shooting Linda Thompson. He also suffered severe choking episodes when the pills dulled the nerves in his esophagus and required emergency injections from Dr. Nick after his heart stopped on more than one occasion. In May 1974, Elvis and a young fan named Paige accidentally overdosed on liquid Vicodin in Palm Springs after his Tahoe engagement. Both developed dangerously low body temperatures in Elvis's cold bedroom, and Paige reportedly suffered lasting harm. Jackie Kahaney remembers, "He said to me one time, 'If I wasn't a celebrity, I'd be put away because I'm crazy. I saw him wiped out, crawling on the bloody floor. I couldn't bear to watch him. One time my wife said to him, 'Elvis, you were great tonight.' And he said, 'You saw the best imitation of Elvis Presley that he's ever done.'" As Elvis's condition worsened, Parker largely ignored it. Some band members believed he did not understand the full severity of Elvis's addiction or illness, even when Elvis injured his own hand to obtain stronger medication. Others believed Parker recognized the problem but did not know how to intervene, instead relying on Elvis's doctors to control it. Parker later said he addressed only poor performances and remained silent because Elvis still offset bad nights with exceptional shows. Parker would later tell Larry Hutchinson, chief investigator to the district attorney general for Memphis, "I suppose I really began to get concerned at the beginning of 1974. I got worried. He'd gained too much weight, and he looked terrible. Now I spoke out, told him he did not look well. He said, 'No disrespect, Colonel, but I know what I'm doing. Stay out of my personal life.'" Many around Elvis questioned why Parker, who had controlled so much of Elvis's life, failed to intervene. Duke Bardwell blamed Parker's lack of compassion, believing he was the one person with enough authority to help Elvis. Byron Raphael had been invited to Vegas for one of Elvis's openings. He says, "There's no question in my mind that the Colonel knew Elvis was dying, and not only did he do nothing to stop it, but in a way, through omission, he was a co-conspirator. There was really no strong relationship between the Colonel and Elvis anymore. He had lost his control, and that had to be a terrible thing for him. The real deadliness of Colonel Parker was that he believed the living Elvis had become an impediment to his management style and ambition. He didn't really want him to die, but he knew that was the only way out. And considering the condition Elvis was in, the best thing that could have happened, because Elvis was easier to control dead than alive, and more valuable too, for merchandising alone. So he just stepped out of the way and let fate take its course. That way, he and Vernon could continue making the kinds of deals that the Colonel always dreamed of making. As if planning for the inevitable, in 1974, Parker approached Vernon about creating Boxcar Enterprises to manage Elvis's non-performance merchandise and new publishing companies. Its name and logo reflected Parker's gambling interests, using the craps term boxcars for a roll of double sixes. Boxcar Enterprises became the exclusive company for marketing Elvis's commercial rights, but ownership heavily favored Parker and his associates. Of 500 shares, Parker held 200, or 40%. While Elvis, Tom Diskin, Freddie Beanstalk, and George Parkhill each received 75 shares, or 15%. Boxcar's salaries also favored Parker and his associates. In 1974, Parker paid himself $27,650, while Elvis earned only $2,750. By 1976, Parker made $36,000, Tom Diskin $46,448, and Elvis just $10,500, with no explanation for why the company's central figure was paid so little. Parker also envisioned Boxcar as a record company, with George Parkhill overseeing operations and RCA handling distribution. Its only LP, however, was Having Fun with Elvis on Stage, a poorly received spoken word collection of Elvis's between-song comments, jokes, and burps and belches. Boxcar also released one single, Growing Up in a Country Way, by Bodie Mountain Express with Kirk Seeley. Although the California group played Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland, its staged country image was mixed awkwardly with Seeley's Elvis-style white suit, creating what Nash describes as the Grand Ole Opry meets Vegas. Kathy Westmoreland believed Parker signed other performers because those around Elvis feared he would not live much longer. Parker planned to make her Boxcar Records' leading artist and offered to manage her, but she declined after concluding that although he could recognize talent, Parker lacked the musical knowledge to develop her career. By this time, Parker's gambling addiction increasingly drove his business decisions. His Hilton debt alone reportedly reached $6 million, and he gambled constantly by telephone from Palm Springs or by having a roulette wheel brought to his Las Vegas rooms. Bitsy Mott believed Parker knowingly made poor, high-risk bets, like playing the 2, 3, 7th, and 11th spot in craps, despite being allowed unusually high limits. His losses became so severe that Mock joked the casinos, not Marie or Charity, would ultimately inherit his estate. During Elvis's August 1974 Las Vegas engagement, his shows were increasingly disrupted by rambling, deeply personal monologues. When addressing rumors of his drug use, Elvis became visibly enraged and shocked the audience when he said to those spreading the rumors, "I'll pull your goddamn tongue out by the roots." After Bill Cosby filled in for an exhausted Elvis, Elvis tried to introduce Parker during the next show, but found him absent. He then mocked Parker from the stage. "And my manager, Colonel Tom Parker, where is he? Is the Colonel around anywhere?" "No, he's out playing roulette. Don't kid me. I know what he's doing. Him and Cosby are out there talking mash and drinking trash, whatever. In September 1974, years of resentment between Elvis and Parker reached a breaking point. Elvis felt trapped by Parker's control and remained angry that he had rejected a $1 million offer for Australian concerts. A hotel incident soon triggered their worst confrontation. After learning that Mater D. Mario's wife was dying of cancer, Elvis visited their home and attempted to heal her by laying hands on her. Because the Hilton prohibited staff from fraternizing with performers, Mario was fired for the visit. Elvis angrily confronted Parker over Mario's firing, but Parker defended the Hilton and said it was not Elvis's concern. That night, Elvis publicly attacked Baron Hilton from the stage. "I think you people ought to know that the big shots at the Hilton are an unfeeling, uncaring group. Baron Hilton's not worth a damn." After the show, Parker furiously confronted Elvis for publicly insulting the Hilton. Their argument continued in Elvis's suite, where Elvis finally did what he had been threatening to do for a long time. He fired Parker. And Nash writes, quote, "But Parker was not to be outdone. Elvis couldn't fire him," he bellowed, "because he quit. 'I'll call a press conference in the morning and say I'm leaving.' Presley yelled back that he'd call one that night. And so it went until Parker, so infuriated that his jowls shook as he pounded the floor with his cane, groused that he wanted only to be paid all the singer owed him and retired to his offices to drop the bill." End quote. Most estimates placed the bill at $2 million, though Billy Smith remembered the amount as high as $10 million. When Vernon saw the bill, he put his head in his hands. Elvis asked, "How could that be?" Vernon said, "Well, he's got it listed here, and he says once we pay him, he'll give up the contract." Elvis and Vernon formally listed their grievances to Parker and ended the partnership, followed by about 10 days of hostile exchanges through intermediaries like Lamar Fike. The split collapsed when Vernon admitted they could not afford Parker's buyout demand and were nearing the point of mortgaging Graceland to cover payroll. Elvis told Joe Esposito, "I guess I'm going to have to go make up with the old bastard." At Parker's Palm Springs home, Parker offered to temporarily reduce his percentage after learning how serious Elvis's financial problems were. Elvis tore up his grievances and reconciled with him, losing what Nash portrays as his best opportunity to escape Parker's control, though their relationship was permanently changed. Billy Smith remembers, "It never got better, it got worse." At the end of September 1974, Elvis began touring despite being visibly unwell. After collapsing in Maryland and ending a Detroit concert after only 30 minutes, Parker and the doctors agreed he needed 5 months off and canceled his January Hilton engagement. Dr. Elias Ganem ordered colon tests because of Elvis's worsening intestinal problems. Although the results were not immediately alarming, his bowel dysfunction became so severe that he traveled with enemas and slept with a towel wrapped around him for protection. Lamar Fike remembers, "He would be so damn drugged he couldn't make it to the bathroom, or he'd get in there and be so groggy he'd fall down on the floor. That's where they'd find him. I used to tell the colonel, 'You're killing this guy's sick.' And he'd say, 'Just as long as he can keep doing the dates, we don't have to worry. He'll get himself back together again." Elvis became increasingly detached from reality, taking Nullo tablets 3 times daily because he feared body odor while often refusing to bathe. By now, Billy and Joe Smith had moved on to the Graceland grounds at Elvis's request. Lamar Fike remembers, "We used to con him into the bathtub when he was filthy, but you didn't physically make him do anything when he wasn't loaded. He'd fight you like a hawk." After Elvis was hospitalized again in January 1975 for breathing problems, Billy Smith, Dr. Nick, and nurse Tish Henley tried harder to reduce his prescription drug use. Vernon, who had recently split from his wife Dee, was hospitalized in the next room after a heart attack, and although Elvis worried more about his father, he still persuaded some of the nurses to bring him drugs. In February 1975, a slimmer Elvis was back in Vegas and enthusiastic about starring with Barbra Streisand in the film remake of A Star is Born. The offer was $500,000 plus 10% of profits, but Parker demanded $1 million and $100,000 in expenses, half the profits, and a separate soundtrack deal, causing negotiations to collapse. Parker acknowledged that Elvis wanted the role, but argued against accepting what he considered an inadequate deal. He was later criticized for prioritizing money over a potentially career-reviving dramatic role, though he eventually claimed Elvis was responsible for the project falling through. Parker said, "There was never no plan for him to do A Star is Born. He told me to make the contract stiff enough where they would turn it down because he did not want to do it." Jerry Schilling said Elvis was disappointed, but trusted that Parker had a valid reason for the failed negotiations and did not openly complain. Lamar Fike believed Elvis privately doubted he could handle the role, but still blamed Parker for losing the opportunity. At 40, Elvis appeared deeply troubled by aging and feared he had missed his final opportunity to prove himself as a serious actor. He told Kathy Westmoreland that no one would remember him because he had never made a lasting classic film, and told Larry Geller that his greatest regret was never winning an Oscar. Elvis became excited by proposed performances in England and at Egypt's pyramids, where Adnan and Essam Khashoggi reportedly increased their offer from $5 million to $10 million. But Parker rejected the deal, and Billy Smith recalled that Elvis appeared devastated when it fell through. Elvis remained hopeful as lucrative international offers arrived, including proposals of $1 million per performance in Germany and Japan. Parker continued rejecting them despite Elvis's enormous overseas popularity, confusing RCA executives because he bragged about the offers while giving inconsistent explanations for refusing to tour abroad. RCA rep Galen Adams remembers, "I was with the Colonel one time when some people from South America came up and offered him $2.5 million for one show, and he was just so nonchalant. He said, 'Well, whenever I need $2.5 million, I'll call you.'" Elvis's finances had deteriorated enough that he soon borrowed $350,000 from a Memphis bank. Parker was also desperate for cash, requiring promoters to place advance ticket money into certificates of deposit in his name. These lucrative overseas concerts could have resolved Elvis and Parker's financial problems, and Weintraub and Hewlett could have handled the travel despite Parker's passport issue. But Parker refused because he feared losing control, especially after hearing Elvis might ask Tom Hewlett to manage him. In July 1975, Elvis tried to repair his relationship with Parker by buying him a $1.2 million G1 turboprop. Elvis had also recently purchased a Convair 880 jet, later named the Lisa Marie, after an unsuccessful attempt to acquire Robert Vesco's impounded Boeing 707. Parker rejected Elvis's gift of the 12-seat plane, saying it was because he couldn't afford the taxes on it, which left Elvis angry and embarrassed. Elvis then seriously considered replacing Parker with Tom Hewlett. According to David Briggs, negotiations advanced far enough that the musicians expected it to happen, and overseas touring had already been discussed. Loanne Miller said Parker also resisted European touring because of his poor health and concerns about dealing with foreign concert promoters. She says, "Colonel was adamant that the fans not be taken advantage of with extremely high-priced tickets, and everyone who wanted to bring Elvis overseas wanted to charge the equivalent of $100. Colonel knew that most of the fans didn't begin to have that kind of money." Of Elvis not traveling overseas, Duke Bardwell says, "To deny him that was the last nail in the coffin. He didn't have anything to look forward to, and so he just went deeper and deeper into the things that let him hide." By July 1975, Elvis's decline was increasingly public and dangerous. He insulted his backup singers on stage in Norfolk, Virginia. A couple of days later, in North Carolina, he accidentally shot and slightly wounded Dr. Nick when the doctor tried to put limits on his medication. And later, he became so impaired during a Las Vegas performance that he lay down on stage and was hospitalized again. After the Norfolk incident, Parker reportedly urged Vernon to remove Elvis from touring for at least 6 months so he could recover. Vernon refused, saying Elvis needed the income and that they would hire another promoter if Parker would not keep him on the road. Elvis told Billy Smith that he hated Parker. Billy remembers, he said, "The Colonel is too concerned with my drug use. I'm tired of the old son of a bitch threatening me, saying he's not going to book me anymore. God damn it, I've done performances that I didn't want to. They booked me in places that I didn't want to be. We need to stick to our old agreement where Colonel takes care of the business part and I take care of the performing. It'll work a hell of a lot better." For New Year's Eve 1975, Parker allowed Jerry Weintraub to book Elvis at the Pontiac Silverdome after the Rolling Stones canceled. The concert was troubled by Elvis's drug use, weak substitute musicians, freezing conditions, and a delay of more than an hour before Elvis took the stage. Joe Guercio and Jackie Kehaney immediately recognized that Elvis was badly impaired and frightened. During the show, Elvis split his pants, he missed the New Year's countdown, sang over the orchestra, and appeared confused about which songs were being played before ending with "Can't Help Falling in Love." Kehaney remembers, "He didn't do 20 minutes. I figured they'd kill him." But the Silverdome booked him back before he even left town. Parker promoted the Silverdome concert as another Elvis milestone. With 62,500 attendees and more than $800,000 in gross revenue, it set a one-night record for a solo performer. After expenses, Elvis and Parker split $300,000 under their 2/3, 1/3 arrangement. But 23 days later, Parker proposed changing their live performance agreement so that he and Elvis would divide all concert profits equally, 50-50. The contract read, quote, "It is hereby understood by both parties that these tours are a joint venture and that Elvis Presley is responsible for the presentation of his stage performance and Colonel Tom Parker and his representatives for the advertising and promotion of the show. This authorization and agreement will run for 7 years from January 22nd, 1976, end quote. Elvis signed the 50-50 agreement without objection. Because he was short of cash, Parker temporarily continued taking only 1/3, with Elvis agreeing to repay the difference later. Now, Parker's focus was on Elvis's recording obligations. Unable to persuade Elvis to enter a studio for nearly a year, RCA brought a mobile recording unit to Graceland on February 2nd, 1976. The den was converted into a makeshift studio with blankets, plywood partitions, and carpeting so Elvis could continue recording live with all the musicians playing together. Felton Jarvis hoped to produce 20 masters during 6 nights of recording and budgeted more than $74,000. Elvis's pill use, erratic behavior, and distractions, including abruptly flying to Denver for a peanut butter sandwich, added another $30,000 to the cost. RCA's Joe Galante recalled that Jarvis considered the recordings poor. RCA's goal had shifted from guiding Elvis's career to simply containing the damage caused by his decline. Parker made a rare visit to both a recording session and Graceland, apparently to monitor events. He was horrified when he heard Elvis's obscene parody of Hurt and ordered the tape destroyed, but copies had already circulated. On the final day, Elvis refused to come downstairs, forcing the session's cancellation. Elvis eventually recorded enough material for Moody Blue, but additional sessions were needed in October to complete the album. Even then, recording progressed slowly because he was distracted by playing pool and eating chicken rather than working. Tony Brown, who played the piano on the fall sessions, remembers, "We'd come to the house and wait all day long, sitting in the living room. One night he was singing a track, and he excused himself. We were all there, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, the Sweet Inspirations. Maybe 2 hours later, he comes downstairs with a hat and a trench coat on and a shotgun, pretending to blow everything up with it. For the next 4 hours, he explained that gun to us and told us how many guns he owned. And then the session was over." Another time, Elvis abruptly stopped a session when a shipment of motorcycles arrived. Some believed Elvis's distractions reflected loneliness and a need for companionship. One night, Felton Jarvis found him alone outside in the dark after he had quietly disappeared. Jarvis asked, "Why are you sitting at her, Elvis?" Elvis let out a sigh. "I'm just so tired of playing Elvis Presley." By spring 1976, frustration and conflict had spread through Elvis's band because his performances were so unpredictable and often poor. Tony Brown estimated Elvis was off about 90% of the time, and Cheryl Nilsson was assigned to reinforce his high notes when he couldn't sustain them. By this point, Elvis's touring drug regimen followed a detailed schedule. Across the first 4 stages, he received stimulants, appetite suppressants, codeine, Dilaudid, Dexedrine, caffeine, Demerol, sedatives, and other medications to wake him, get him through the show, and then bring him back down afterward. At bedtime, Elvis received a 5th round containing Placidil, Quaaludes, several other sedatives, and amphetamine, blood pressure medication, and a laxative. If he still could not sleep, a 6th stage added Emmental and more Quaaludes. By April 1976, Elvis's condition appeared life-threatening, with episodes in Tahoe where he could barely walk. John O'Grady reported this to Ed Hookstratton, and by June, he, Hookstratton, and Priscilla were trying to place Elvis in a long-term treatment program, including options in San Diego, Maui, and the Mid-South. That's interesting. Elvis and Priscilla have been divorced for, almost 3 years at that point? So I think it's interesting that she was included in talks of the intervention. Anyway, at this point, Elvis reportedly suffered numerous serious health problems and had gained about 70 pounds, rising from 175 to 245, which he tried to conceal with dark jumpsuits. He privately claimed to Kathy Westmoreland that he had bone cancer, though this was never established, while Elton John recalled when he saw him at backstage after a concert that Elvis had looked already gravely ill. In July 1976, Dr. Gannon placed Elvis on a sleep diet using liquid nutrition and sedatives to keep him asleep during withdrawal. His chalk white stool indicated serious liver trouble. While there were quite a few physicians that contributed to Elvis's problems, Tennessee records later showed that Dr. Nick alone had prescribed him 1,296 amphetamines, 1,891 sedatives, and 910 narcotics in 1975, with even larger quantities to follow. When Elvis returned to Memphis, he was depressed and withdrawn, but the proposed hospitalization never happened because no one was willing to or able to force the issue. Parker, Vernon, and the Memphis Mafia were all unable to intervene decisively. By then, Elvis's entourage consisted largely of younger men, including Dr. Nick's son Dean and Elvis's stepbrothers David, Billy, and Rick Stanley. Some treated the job mainly as a paycheck and access to Elvis's fame, while longtime associates Joe Esposito and Jerry Schilling were living in California and had become less involved. Elvis also had become estranged from Red and Sonny West, partly because of their aggressive treatment of fans and a resulting lawsuit. Parker likewise felt excluded from Elvis' life and expressed his frustration in a June 16th letter following an 11-day tour. Parker wrote, "As I told Vernon today, I have not heard from anyone since I got back, neither from Sonny or from any other member of your staff. I just wanted you to know in the event you feel that they are in contact with me, but they are not." Overall, Parker had lost much of his broader managerial vision and was increasingly driven by gambling. Mike Growney, general manager of the Gold Coast Casino, remembers, "I was gambling at the Las Vegas Hilton, and there was one man sitting there, and I noticed that a security guard would keep coming over and bringing a stack of $100 chips. He would put the whole pile down and bet the number, and then they would spin the wheel. Then the security guard would bring over another stack of chips, and it's $10,000 at a time. I said to the floor man, 'What's going on?' And he said, 'That's Colonel Parker. He's lost $1 million.'" Despite his own extravagance, Parker closely guarded Elvis's commercial rights. He met 26-year-old merchandiser Joe Shane after Shane sold thousands of unauthorized Aloha from Hawaii t-shirts and nearly secured distribution through 1900 JCPenney stores before discovering he lacked the necessary license. Parker called him and said, "I understand you're trying to sell some merchandise of my boy." Shane told him, "Yes, sir, I am." Parker asked, "Do you pay me any money for that?" Shane responded, "No, sir, I do not." Parker said flatly, "Well, I think you'd better start." Parker demanded 25% of retail sales, far above the typical 10% of wholesale, for Shane to keep selling Elvis merchandise. Shane reluctantly agreed and traveled to California to finalize the licensing deal. A former associate said Parker preferred dealing with ambitious people who were rising quickly but still financially vulnerable, making them more likely to accept a smaller share of the profits, and that was Shane. Parker liked Shane's carnival-style sales instincts and was impressed that a single advertisement in the National Enquirer sold 1,500 shirts a day, though he immediately questioned why sales were not higher. A few days later, after their agreement, they went to William Morris and signed paperwork that made Shane the world's only other officially licensed Elvis merchandiser in the world. On July 13, 1976, Vernon fired Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler with 1 week's pay, officially citing payroll cuts, but also responding to a lawsuit and ongoing tensions. Red was especially hurt that Elvis did not tell him personally, and Elvis remained silent despite being upset. 10 days after the firings, Elvis began another tour looking exhausted and barely performing. Parker warned that continued poor shows could cost him his fans, Las Vegas contract, and RCA deal. Tom Hewlett comforted Elvis, but privately believed he could not continue much longer. At Elvis's August 28, 1976 Houston concert, critic Bob Claypool described him as overweight, incoherent, stumbling, and far removed from his former greatness. Claypool wrote that instead of thrilling him as Elvis once had, the performance left him heartbroken. Lamar Fike, who had replaced Sonny as security chief, remembers, "It was really bad. We almost lost him in Houston, but nobody would say it, even though it was just tearing us up, ripping us to shreds. I felt like some sort of voice in the wilderness. I said, 'God almighty, guys, look what's happening here. He's going on us.'" Larry Geller was also alarmed by Elvis's condition, but believed most members of the entourage refused to acknowledge how serious it had become. Geller says, "It took him more and more time to get ready for the show. I would go to people's rooms and literally cry. I'd say, 'Look at him, he's sick and something's got to be done.' And they'd say, 'No, man, in 20 years, Elvis is going to look better than he does today. He's going to pull out of it.'" Dr. Nick and Billy Smith tried to reduce Elvis's drug intake by weakening injections, emptying capsules, and replacing stronger pills with placebos in scheduled attack packets. But Elvis quickly noticed and demanded stronger drugs and sought other suppliers in Las Vegas or Los Angeles when Dr. Nick refused. The public still believed Elvis was merely ill and didn't know the extent of his drug addiction. That secrecy was threatened in September 1976 when rumors spread that Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler planned a revealing book public intended to force Elvis to confront his decline. Jackie Kahane had actually encouraged members of the group to go to the newspapers months before. Joe Guercio asked, "What would the point be?" Kahane said, "To save his life. He's on dope. He's on everything." Guercio said, "Forget it. You look like an ass." Larry Geller remembers, "When Elvis found out about the book, he was so hurt. We were in Mobile, Alabama. I can still see him sitting in bed with tears running down his cheeks. He said, 'How could these guys do this to me? They could have anything they want.' He wasn't so worried about how it would impact him, but rather his family. He kept saying, 'How is it going to affect my father and my little girl? When she grows up, what is she going to think about her daddy?" Elvis asked Parker to stop the book, so Parker hired John O'Grady, who discovered that star reporter Steve Dunleavy was helping write it. Parker offered Red, Sonny, and Dave Hebler $50,000 to abandon the project, but they refused, and no further action was taken. Accounts differed over Parker's role. Larry Geller believed he wanted the book published, while Lamar Fike said Parker learned of it too late to stop the contracts. Elvis thought the problem had been resolved, but his anxiety over the book reportedly led to heavier overeating and further weight gain. By December 1976, Elvis's weight and decline were startlingly visible. During the Las Vegas engagement, he injured his ankle, complained angrily on stage, and declared, "I hate Las Vegas." Nash writes, quote, "By the last months of 76, Linda Thompson, tired of watching Elvis self-destruct and feeling that I wasn't worth anything without him, had all but phased herself out of his life. In November, he met 20-year-old Ginger Alden, another dark-haired Memphis beauty queen who currently held the title of Miss Mid-South Bear. Ginger reminded Elvis of a young Priscilla, but several factors hampered the courtship, including Elvis's physical condition, the 22-year difference in their ages, and Ginger's feisty independence." So that's interesting that Nash says that Linda phased herself out of his life because she was at the hotel in San Francisco when Elvis flew Ginger in. Anyway, unlike Elvis's previous girlfriends, Ginger maintained her independence and often chose friends over staying at Graceland or touring. In January 1977, she backed out of a Nashville trip, after which an angry Elvis checked into a hotel, but skipped the recording session, citing a sore throat. The next day, when he was back in Memphis, Parker warned him to meet his recording obligations or lose future tours. Reports blamed Ginger for absolutely running him ragged, yet Elvis soon gave her an 11.5 carat engagement ring and took her family to Hawaii in March 1977. During the Hawaii trip, Larry Geller urged Elvis to improve his diet and take vitamins and rest. Elvis promised to take 6 months to a year off, return to the islands to recover, and make broader changes to his life. Geller remembers, "He was adamant about firing the colonel. I'd never heard him so resolute, and I'm convinced he was going to get rid of him." Elvis brought up the 74 incident and expressed remorse that he hadn't done it then. Geller says, "He even had the time picked out when he was going to make his move, and he was certain he wanted Tom Hewlett to manage his career. He said, 'Larry, I promise you, this is exactly what I'm going to do.'" Elvis was going to start after the tour ended in August. He cut the Hawaii trip short because of an eye infection and returned to touring in visibly poor condition. On March 30th, 1977, in Alexandria, Louisiana, he struggled through "Can't Help Falling in Love" and changed a lyric to the ominous phrase, "Wise men know when it's time to go." The following day in Baton Rouge, Elvis said he was too ill to perform and wanted to cancel the remaining tour. Larry Geller worried that doing so would appear to confirm the damaging allegations from the forthcoming West Hebler book, whose details were already reaching the British press. After Geller told Elvis about the book's revelations, Elvis became enraged and distressed enough that Dr. Nick sedated him. When he awoke, Elvis insisted on returning to Memphis and entering the hospital, partly for health reasons and partly so insurance would cover the canceled tour. Parker planned to reschedule the canceled concerts, but his handling of the last-minute Baton Rouge cancellation was strange. Kathy Westmoreland remembers, "He had us go on stage and take our places as if Elvis was coming out. Then he faked a blackout and whisked us out of the building into police cars. Tom Hewlett said they were trying to get everybody out without getting hurt. In fact, there was a riot afterwards." 3 weeks later, Elvis resumed touring with Ginger, but appeared indifferent and received harsh reviews. In late April 1977, the Nashville Banner reported that Parker had quietly offered Elvis's management contract for sale, and that West Coast businessmen were interested. The reported reasons for Parker offering Elvis's contract for sale were Parker's declining health and severe financial problems caused by gambling. Columnist Bill Hance also claimed Parker and Elvis had not spoken directly in 2 years. The next day, Parker called Nashville's Tennessean from St. Paul to deny the report that he was trying to sell Elvis's management contract. He said there were absolutely no plans to sell Elvis Presley. "I'm here working with Elvis. I'm in good health and I don't have any debts, at least none that I can't pay." Joe Esposito advised similarly and also dismissed the report that the two men didn't talk. They're on the road together all the time, and the Colonel just spoke to Elvis yesterday. Although the source of the report was unclear, Parker was considering major changes. He contacted Led Zeppelin manager Peter Grant about promoting a European Elvis tour without Parker accompanying him, with further discussions planned after Elvis's final summer shows. By May 1977, Elvis's condition and weight had deteriorated so severely that he wore the same white Aztec pattern jumpsuit throughout a 13-day tour because it was the only costume that still fit him. In Knoxville, he appeared pale, swollen, and physically exhausted. He repeatedly left the stage for long periods during concerts in Maryland, and after the Baltimore show, the audience departed confused and concerned rather than applauding. Elvis appeared aware of his approaching death. He invited songwriter Ben Wiseman up to his suite in Las Vegas, and as he sat at the piano, told him, "There's a song I love called Softly As I Leave You, but it's not about a man leaving a lady. It's about a man who's going to die." Before the CBS taping in Rapid City, South Dakota, Elvis made a grim joke about looking good in his coffin and told Kathleen Westmoreland to wear white at his funeral. She was shaken because she believed his death could happen at any time. After the June tour, Elvis expected to rest throughout July and spend 2 weeks with Lisa Marie before touring resumed on August 17th. Although he had usually enjoyed working and often requested more shows himself, he now recognized that he urgently needed time off. He had told Westmoreland, "I'm so tired. I don't want to go out on this next tour, but I have to. The Colonel owes $8 million. Nash writes, quote, Elvis, too, was feeling the pinch. Recently, he had issued Priscilla a deed of trust to Graceland, guaranteeing her nearly $500,000 still owed on the divorce settlement, end quote. Elvis ended his June 26, 1977 Indianapolis concert, which was Parker's 68th birthday, with his strongest performance in months, including powerful versions of Hurt and Bridge Over Troubled Water. Yet Lamar Fike was alarmed by how exhausted and lifeless Elvis had appeared moments earlier, fearing it was already too late for him to recover. Fike said to the entourage, "He'll never see the snow fly, I promise you." On May 21st in Louisville, Parker made an extremely rare visit to Elvis's hotel room and personally witnessed evidence of his decline. Dr. Nick was administering the drugs used to turn Elvis from lethargic and ill into an energetic stage performer when Larry Geller heard pounding on the door. He opened it to find Parker leaning on his cane. Parker barked, "Where is he?" Larry told him he'd get Elvis and began walking to the bedroom. Parker said, "No, I'm going in." Parker entered to find Elvis semi-conscious and moaning while Dr. Nick desperately tried to revive him by plunging his head into a bucket of ice water. Geller initially felt relieved that Parker had finally witnessed the severity of Elvis's condition, hoping he would stop the tour and arrange treatment. Instead, Parker left the room after only about 90 seconds. Parker shouted at Geller, "You listen to me. The only thing that's important is that he's on that stage tonight. Nothing else matters." Then he walked out. Geller remembers, "I thought, oh my God, what about Elvis? Doesn't Colonel understand that this man is in dire straits? I was horrified. I can only surmise he acted out of stupidity and denial. But still, how could he be so callous?" Nash writes, quote, "The answer to that question was one that almost no one knew, with origins deep in Parker's carny past. As a young man on the circuit, one of his jobs had been to befriend the geek, the pathetic dipsomaniac who sat in a pit and bit the heads off live chickens in exchange for a daily bottle. Periodically, the poor soul would run off and hide in the fields, unable to face another bloody performance. Parker would find him, shuddering and desperate, then wave the bottle as bait and reward and bring him back to do the show," end quote. So basically, Parker had learned to view addictions as something to manage just enough to keep the performer working. Washington Post writer Richard Harrington portrayed Elvis as the poor country boy who achieved fame and Parker as the mysterious outsider who exploited him. Parker's gambling made him both exploiter and victim. By August 1977, his reported Hilton gambling debts had reached $30 million. It is in that sad fact that the lines begin to blur between the geek, his keeper, and the chicken, dancing or otherwise. That's it for Chapter 18. Stay tuned for Chapter 19, which is titled, We Think He OD'd, The Death of Elvis. See you then.